You ever watch a kid's heart break in real time? I have. And not just any kid, my kid. My son, Jamie. It was his 10th birthday. We had the whole family over balloons sagging from the ceiling, paper plates littered with frosting stains, that weird cousin laughing too loud at nothing. You know the vibe. It was loud, messy, real. And then it all went quiet. "Go on, open it, champ," boomed my stepfather, Ron, his voice dripping with fake cheer as he slid a pristine white apple box across the table. All eyes snapped to it like it held Excalibur. Jamie's eyes lit up. I could see his little fingers twitch with excitement. "Is it really?" he whispered, barely breathing. "Why don't you open it and find out?" Ron said with a wink, one of those winks that pretends. It's friendly but really says, "I'm in control. I should have known. God, I did know." Jamie tore into the wrapping like a kid unwrapping happiness itself. And then, silence. Inside the box, nestled like some kind of sick joke, was a jagged, dirty rock. Just A-A-A-R. Jamie blinked. Once, twice. "Is this a joke?" Ron leaned back, that smug mug of his halfway to his lips. "Only good boys get real gifts, right?" Laughter exploded around the room like a grenade. My sister-in-law nearly fell off her chair, snorting. My cousin dabbed her eyes from cackling too hard. Even my mom, his wife, chuckled and muttered, "Ron, you're terrible." Like this was sitcom gold. I didn't laugh. Jamie didn't either. He just stared at that rock like it had personally betrayed him. His cheeks flushed red. His shoulders sank like someone had yanked the strings holding him up. And he turned to me. I knew that look. It was mine once. The one I wore every Christmas, birthday, report card day, every time. Ron did his little fatherly lesson routine. Only now, he picked the wrong target. "Ah, lighten up," Ron chuckled, waving a hand like this was all harmless. "Just a bit of fun." "Yeah, lighten up." My sister, Danielle, chimed in. Nudging Jamie like that would make it all better. "There's a real gift coming." This was just pre-game, except there wasn't. I knew it. This was it. The gift, a rock in a box, and a lesson in humiliation. I clenched my jaw so tight, my molars ached. "Wow," I said quietly. "You really went all out this time." Ron shrugged. "Maybe next year, if he learns some manners, we'll see about the real deal." That was it. That was the exact second something inside me cracked. Like an old pipe that had been leaking for years, and someone just finally twisted the wrong valve. I scanned the room, saw the smirks, the chuckles behind wine glasses, the people who watched a child's spirit shrink and thought it was funny. They didn't know what was coming, but oh, they would. It's not like this was new. This was classic Ron. He didn't hit. He didn't yell. His weapon of choice was shame, packaged with a bow and labeled character building. "You're not like your brother," he'd say when I brought home a B instead of an A. "He's brilliant. You? Well, you try. That counts." I tried, all right. I busted my ass for years. Scholarships, startups, side hustles, you name it. Built a life from scratch just to hear him say, "You got lucky." Every family gathering was a stage. And I was the fool with a mic. And when Jamie was born, part of me hoped naively that things would be different. Spoiler, they weren't. Ron barely remembered Jamie's birthday, never asked how school was going. When he did speak to him, it was laced with backhanded digs. Coddling him too much, he once said, when Jamie cried after scraping his knee. "He's gonna grow up soft." "Soft?" I snapped that day. "No, he's going to grow up kind. That's not weakness. That's what you never were." That conversation didn't go far, but it stayed with me, like a warning. So when Jamie opened that box and Ron laughed in his face, something ancient and dangerous stirred in me. I stood. "You know," I said, voice calm but cracking around the edges, "you've spent your life pretending. You're the backbone of this family. But really, you're just a scared old man who hides behind sarcasm and coffee mugs." The room froze. My mom blinked. Danielle spilled her wine. Ron looked at me like I'd grown fangs. "Watch your mouth," he said. "No, you watch your mouth," I fired back. "You just humiliated my son in front of everyone for what? A laugh? A twisted life lesson? It was a joke," he barked. "You weren't joking. You were performing. Like always, you find someone smaller, someone who trusts you, and you crush them." With a smile, Jamie was gripping the edge of his chair now, silent, still. But his eyes, those eyes were locked on me, like he was waiting to see if I'd let this slide. Not this time. You all saw it, I said, sweeping my gaze across the room. And you laughed. Silence. Not even a cough. Want to know what's really funny? I reached into my pocket. There's a real iPhone. In the car. I brought it. I was gonna let Ron hand it over. Thought maybe he'd finally act like a grandfather. Gasps. A few wide eyes. A stunned wait what? From Danielle. Yeah, I nodded. But he wanted his little show. And you all gave it a standing ovation. Without a word, I walked to the door, stepped outside, and returned with the real box. I handed it to Jamie. This is from me. Because you are a good kid. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise. His lip trembled. Thanks, Dad. My heart damn near broke. But I wasn't done. I pulled out an envelope thicker than it looked and slapped it on the table in front of Ron. What's this? He asked, eyes narrowing. Updated power of attorney. You're no longer listed. As of today, you're out. Danielle's husband, Nate, finally looked up from his drink. Wait, what? I glanced at Danielle. Might want to explain that trust account you borrowed from. Her face drained of color. Mom finally stood. Can we not do this now? It's Jamie's birthday. Exactly, I said, dead calm. And you all just ruined it. I turned to Jamie. Let's go, buddy. He stood, box in hand, still unopened. We walked toward the door, but just before I left, I looked back. This show's over, I said. Next episode, it's mine. We didn't say a word on the drive home. Jamie sat in the passenger seat, still cradling the box like it might vanish if he blinked. The streetlights caught the edge of his face, and I saw it that mix of pride and something I recognized way too well. Shame. Not for himself. For them. He broke the silence first. Why did he do that? His voice was quiet. Just 10 years old, but already carrying the weight of too many grown-up questions. I took a deep breath, hands tight around the steering wheel. Because some people never learn how to feel small without making someone else feel smaller. Jamie turned the box in his hands. Was he like that to you too? I nodded. Worse. But I let it happen. I thought that's what dads were supposed to be like. He looked out the window, his breath fogging up the glass. I don't want to be like him. My throat tightened. You won't. That night, after he fell asleep, finally safe, finally out of reach, I sat on the edge of my bed with the envelope still in my hand. I'd rehearsed what I did 100 times in my head. But doing it in front of everyone, that wasn't part of the plan. I'd snapped. And, honestly, I wasn't sorry. By morning, the texts started rolling in. First from Danielle. You could have pulled me aside instead of embarrassing me in front of everyone. Then my mom, please don't do anything you can't take back. Your father's upset. So is everyone else. And Ron? Silence. Not even a fake apology. Just absence. Typical. I ignored all of it. I had bigger things to deal with. Step 1 was securing Jamie's future. I pulled every document related to his college fund, updated the access rights, and added 2-step verification on everything. I opened a new account at a different bank, one no one in my family had a clue about. Step 2, damage control. Ron had his fingers in a lot of places he didn't belong. Our mortgage, for example. Years ago, I'd let him co-sign when I was just starting my business and needed the boost. He never paid a dime but acted like he owned the place. So I called my lawyer. I want his name off the deed. And off everything else. She sighed. Finally. A week passed. Jamie was smiling again. Genuinely this time. Not that fragile kind of smile kids use when they're pretending things are fine. He slept easier, laughed louder, started drawing again, something he hadn't done in months. The house felt warmer, like we'd finally shaken off something toxic in the air. Then Tuesday hit. I came home to find a manila envelope stuffed halfway into our mailbox. No return address. Inside, legal papers. Ron was contesting the power of attorney change, trying to restore family control over the finances. The nerve. I sat down, called my lawyer again, and forwarded everything. Looks like he's gearing up for a fight, she said. Then I hope he brought gloves. Later that night, Jamie walked into the room while I was sorting through files. Are we in trouble? He asked, voice small. No, I said, setting everything aside. But they are. He chewed on that for a second. Good, I smiled. You sure you're okay? He nodded, then hesitated. I made something today. He handed me a drawing, a simple sketch of a superhero. It was labeled Dad with a cape, a shield, and a little boy beside him holding a phone box. I couldn't speak. 2 days later, the fallout really started. Danielle's husband Nate called me. First time in years he initiated anything. I didn't know, he said, about the account, the trust, any of it. I believe you, I said, and I did. He never had the stomach for schemes. You're really going through with this? Already did. There was a pause. Danielle's freaking out. She said, you're ruining the family. No, I said calmly. I'm finally cleaning it. Then came the kicker. I got a call from Jamie's school counselor. Mr. Rivera, just a heads up. Jamie had an emotional moment during group time. Nothing serious, he's okay. But he mentioned something about his grandfather calling him a bad boy. My stomach sank. I appreciate the call, I said. When Jamie got home, I asked him gently. He looked down and nodded. Messed. Parker said, bad people don't get to define who we are. I blinked. She's absolutely right. Then he pulled out something from his backpack, a custom phone case he'd designed in art class. It had bold letters across the back, only good boys get toys. Underneath it, in smaller letters, he'd scribbled, I'm a good boy. God, I wanted to cry. But I just ruffled his hair instead and said, you're more than good, kid. You're gold. By Friday, things reached peak insanity. Danielle called me at 10 p.m. screaming, you exposed my account to Nate. You humiliated me. No, you did that all by yourself. You're destroying the family. You really need to update that script. You think I destroyed it? You just didn't like when someone finally turned on the lights. Then she said something that told me everything I needed to know. I only took a little from the college fund. You know how hard things are. We deserve a break sometimes. You deserve a vacation from your nephew's future. That was the moment I realized none of them would ever get it. Not Ron, not Danielle, not even my mom, who still hadn't apologized, only guilt-tripped. They didn't want healing. They wanted control. That Sunday, I took Jamie to the Apple store. Not because he needed anything, but because I wanted him to walk into that space, the very place that box had represented, and reclaim it. He picked out a case for the phone, blue with little lightning bolts. Classic Jamie. At checkout, the cashier asked, was this a birthday present? Jamie nodded. Yeah, from my dad. He says I deserve it. The cashier smiled. Well, sounds like you've got a pretty cool dad. Jamie beamed. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. A week after the Apple store, things were quiet. Too quiet. I knew my family. Quiet didn't mean peace, it meant planning. They weren't used to being challenged, especially not by me. For years, I played the peacemaker, the fixer, the one who smiled through the insults, paid the bills they forgot, and kept their secrets, because I thought that's what sons did. But something had shifted in me. Ever since Jamie opened that box and looked at me with those questioning eyes I used to wear, I couldn't unsee the pattern. I couldn't unfeel it. And now, I wasn't playing their game anymore. The first real crack came from Mom. She showed up unannounced. No call, just the soft knock at the door and the "it's me" honey voice she always used when she wanted something. Jamie was at a friend's house, thankfully. Can we talk? She asked, standing awkwardly on the porch like it was foreign soil. I didn't answer right away. Just looked at her, really looked at her. She was dressed neat, makeup done, pearls on like armor, trying to look like control when she was falling apart. I stepped aside and let her in. She didn't waste time. Ron's not well. I waited. He's been having dizzy spells, shortness of breath, stress mostly. I folded my arms. He's stressed? Imagine how Jamie felt. That landed. Her shoulders sank. It was a mistake. He meant it as a joke. No, I interrupted, calm but cold. He meant it as a message, like he always does. Control, wrapped in humor, dressed up as tradition. And you've enabled it for years. She looked like I'd slapped her. Do you think I wanted this? She said. To see my family ripped apart? No. I think you wanted it quiet, clean, like it's always been. You keep pretending things aren't broken, because pretending feels easier than fixing. She blinked, eyes glossy now. What can I do to fix it? I walked over to the dining table, picked up a folder, and handed it to her. What's this? Bank statements, college fund access logs, the forged signature from Danielle, and a timeline of every time Dad used Jamie's social to open credit lines. She just stared at it. Show that to your conscience, I said. Then we'll talk. She left without another word. That night, I barely slept. Not because of guilt, but because my phone wouldn't stop lighting up. Unknown numbers, no voicemails, just the ghosts of a family panicking behind blocked caller IDs. By morning, I knew something had shifted. I got a call from a woman who introduced herself as Detective Rachel Moore with Financial Crimes. Mr. Rivera, are you available to come in and give a full statement? We've reviewed the report and believe there's potential for further criminal investigation, especially regarding the use of a minor's identity. I felt the air leave my lungs. Not fear, relief. Absolutely, I said. The next 48 hours moved like thunder. I walked into the police department with a full binder. Every document, every screenshot. Video clips from the birthday party where Ron humiliated Jamie, his voice crystal clear over the sound of laughter. They didn't laugh when they watched it. Jesus, the detective muttered. That kid just takes it. I nodded, because that's what he learned from me. Until now. Meanwhile, Danielle was unraveling. Nate called me again. Voice sharp, panicked. She told me she forged your name. Said it wasn't a big deal. Said you'd never press charges. I said nothing. She drained part of our joint account, he added. Took Ellie's tuition money. I don't even know where she went. I sighed. Check Bali. There was a pause. You're serious? Her Instagram stories suggest so. He cursed under his breath. You need help? I asked. He hesitated. Honestly? Yeah. I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. I gave him the number for my attorney. She doesn't just handle lawsuits. She helps people untangle from disasters. Call her. He thanked me, his voice hollow. I thought you were the problem. For years I bought into the image Ron, the wise patriarch, Danielle the golden girl, your mom, the peacekeeper. I never realized you were the one keeping everything together. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. 2 days later, the subpoenas went out. Ron, Danielle, even mom. Civil court dates were issued. Depositions scheduled. The whole machine was turning now. I got emails from the fraud division, updates, progress reports, terms like willful identity misuse, custodial breach, intent to defraud. All legal words for what the hell were they thinking. And then, another envelope, delivered by hand this time. Ron's lawyer. They were trying to sue me for defamation. I read it twice, then laughed. A deep, exhausted, almost amused laugh. They wanted to take me to court for telling the truth. Perfect. I showed the paperwork to my lawyer, Lydia. She rolled her eyes so hard I thought she'd pull something. Let them. Honestly. It'll open the door for discovery. We'll drag everything into the light. I'm not looking for money, I said. I want accountability, Taipei publicly. You'll get it, she said. But be prepared, it's going to get messy. It's already messy, I muttered. But I'm done mopping up after them. At home, Jamie could tell something was shifting. He asked me one night, as we watched some old animated movie on the couch, are they mad at you? I turned to him. Yeah, probably. He thought about it. Are you mad at them? I looked at him carefully. No, I'm disappointed, hurt. But mostly, I'm done pretending they didn't do what they did. He nodded slowly. Like when someone cheats at a game and acts like it was fair? Exactly, I said, smiling a little. Except the stakes were way higher. He leaned his head against my shoulder. I'm glad you don't let them cheat anymore. The trial date was set, June 17th. Civil court. Fraud. Misuse of minor's identity. Forgery. Lydia prepped everything. She was ruthless. Every fact, every document, every timeline meticulously arranged. I want the judge to walk out of there wondering why you didn't go nuclear sooner, she said. And I was ready. I'd spent my whole life playing defense, trying not to rock the boat, trying to be the good one. But Ron gave my kid a rock in a box and called it character building. Now he'd get to see what real character looked like. The courthouse smelled like old paper and new tension. That particular kind of silence right before something big happens, where every cough feels too loud and every eye watches too closely. Jamie wasn't there. I made sure of it. Lydia and I agreed he'd been through enough, but I carried a picture of him in my pocket, a reminder of why we were here in the first place. It started simple. Just names on a docket, the judge confirming everyone was present. Then it began. Lydia stood, sharp in her dark suit, voice even and calm. Your Honor, this case centers around not just financial misconduct, but emotional and legal exploitation of a minor. The defendant, Richard Ronson, used his grandson's social security number to open 3 credit accounts. Simultaneously, the co-defendant, Danielle Rivera, illegally withdrew funds from a college savings account she did not have access to. The judge raised an eyebrow. And the plaintiff? I stood. My voice came out steady. I'm Noah Rivera. I'm the father. And I'm here because they turned my son into a target financially, emotionally, and legally. Danielle wouldn't look at me. Her husband, Nate, sat 3 chairs away from her. Ron, though, he looked like stone, arms folded, jaw set. The same look he always wore when he thought the rules didn't apply to him. This time, they did. Lydia called the banker first. A middle-aged woman with glasses and the kind of memory you don't want to test. I handled the withdrawal from the college fund, she said. The woman claimed to have verbal authorization, signed a form as Mr. Rivera. Lydia handed over a document. Is this the signature? She nodded. Yes, but I recognized later that it didn't match the one on file. Did she seem unsure or nervous? Not at all, the woman replied. She smiled, even made small talk about her yoga trip. Danielle shrank into her seat. Next came the forensic accountant. Clean, clinical, no nonsense. They broke down the credit cards, 3 of them, each maxed out, opened under Jamie's name. Ron's number used for verification, his address listed. The room started to feel colder. Lydia turned to the judge. We'll be submitting these records into evidence, along with a recorded voicemail from Mr. Ronson. The audio crackled to life. It was Ron's voice, unmistakably. It's just some cards. He's a kid. It's not like he's using them. What's the big deal? The silence that followed was the kind you could bottle and sell as guilt. Then it was my turn. Lydia guided me through it. Not just the financials, but the emotional part. The humiliation. The rock in the box. Jamie's shrinking smile. I told them everything. Not for pity, but for truth. He looked at that rock, I said, and then looked at me, like he was asking if he'd done something wrong. And in that moment, I realized I'd let my son carry the same weight I grew up under. I saw the court clerk blink fast, like she was trying not to cry. The judge nodded. Thank you, Mr. Rivera. Then came Danielle's turn on the stand. She tried to stay composed, but her voice shook before she even sat down. Lydia was polite, surgical. Did you forge Mr. Rivera's signature? Danielle hesitated. I thought I had permission. Lydia raised an eyebrow. You thought? Or you didn't? Danielle looked down. I didn't. And where did that money go? Danielle swallowed. It was for personal wellness, specifically. Lydia pressed. Danielle flinched. A retreat. In Bali. The courtroom shifted. A soft wave of murmurs. Did you post photos from this wellness trip on Instagram? Danielle looked like she wanted to vanish. Yes. Lydia handed the judge a printed screenshot. Healing my inner child on the beach. #deserve this. The judge stared at it for a moment, then slowly set it down. Finally, Ron took the stand. He walked slowly, leaning heavier on his cane than usual. A show, I thought, but I let him have it. Let him sit, let him get comfortable. Lydia didn't go easy. Did you use your grandson's information to open credit accounts? Ron crossed his arms. I don't recall. Did you receive calls from the bank confirming those accounts? I receive a lot of calls, he shrugged. We have transcripts, phone logs, and verification recordings, Lydia replied. Would you like to amend your answer? He looked at the judge, not at Lydia, not at me. I didn't think it mattered, he finally said. And why is that? Lydia asked. He's a kid. He'll have time to fix his credit. Lydia stared at him. He's 10. Ron didn't answer. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Ronson, do you understand the weight of what you're saying? Ron stayed silent. His arrogance had finally led him here, and now there were no smirks left. When the day ended, the judge adjourned until the following morning for deliberation. But even before the gavel fell, I could feel it. Something had shifted, not just legally, morally. For once, the truth didn't whisper. It thundered. That night, I took Jamie for ice cream. Not to celebrate, just to be normal. We sat on a bench. He picked mint chip. I stuck with vanilla. Did they say sorry yet? He asked. No, I said. But they will. Or if they don't, the court will say it for them. He licked his cone, thinking, do you think they'll get in trouble? I nodded. Yeah. And not just with the judge. With everyone who believed in them. With themselves. He looked at me. Is that revenge? I smiled. No. That's consequences. He didn't ask more. He didn't need to. The next day, The ruling came down. Danielle was ordered to repay the full $2,200 to Jamie's college account, plus a penalty for forgery. Ron was fined, stripped of any remaining custodial rights, and formally referred to the district attorney for identity theft of a minor. The judge recommended a freeze on all accounts linked to Jamie's name. An official request to clear his credit history was approved. Lydia leaned over. That's as good as it gets in civil court. And then, almost as an afterthought, the judge added, one last thing, this court recommends the plaintiff seek therapy services for the child involved at the expense of the defendants. That one made me pause, not because Jamie was broken, but because someone finally understood what damage doesn't look like on paper. We walked out into the sunlight. Nate was waiting by the steps, alone. He nodded at me. I filed for separation. I nodded back. Good. Danielle was nowhere in sight. Ron sat in the back of a town car, window down, face blank. I didn't say a word. I didn't wave. I didn't need to, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to fix anything. I had already started building something better. Fallout doesn't come all at once. It creeps. Slow and sharp, like a splinter you don't notice until you lean wrong. The first echo came 2 days after the ruling. A headline in the local paper. Retired councilman accused of identity theft against grandson civil court rules in favor of family's father. It wasn't front page, but it was enough. The article didn't use Jamie's full name, just his initials. But in a town like ours, that didn't matter. Everyone knew. Ron's picture was grainy. He looked smaller in print, like even the ink didn't respect him anymore. Danielle wasn't mentioned directly, but the article hinted at forged authorizations and trust fund misuse. My phone buzzed constantly. Some texts from old friends, a few from coworkers. I had no idea, man. Good on you. I remember your dad from that city fundraiser. What a joke. Takes guts to do what you did. I didn't respond to most of them. I wasn't looking for applause, just space. Then came the GoFundMe. No joke. Someone, probably mom, set one up. Help Richard rebuild, a grandfather in crisis. Target, $40,000 raised, $2,600 top donation. Danielle R., $50.00. I stared at it, stunned. Not at the audacity, but at how deeply they still refused to get it. There was no apology in that campaign. Just a sad story. Spun like Ron had been victimized by some cold-hearted son out for revenge. Narratives are funny that way. People cling to the ones that feel safest, the ones that hurt the least, even if they're lies. Jamie found the page while watching videos on my iPad. Why are people giving Grandpa money? He asked. I looked at him, really looked. He didn't seem angry, just confused. They don't know the whole story, I said. Sometimes people help the wrong side because it's easier than facing the truth. He nodded slowly, then turned the screen off. Do we need help? He asked. No, I said without hesitation. We're okay. He smiled at that, like just knowing we had enough was enough. A few days later, I ran into Danielle. It wasn't planned. I was at the hardware store picking up light bulbs and a new sink fixture, and she turned the corner like a ghost out of memory. Her face was bare, no makeup, her hair pulled back in a way that screamed exhaustion more than effort. She froze. I didn't. Hey, I said flatly. She cleared her throat. Can we talk? I should have said no, but I didn't. We walked outside, near the garden section. The air smelled like soil and sunscreen. I wanted to say I'm sorry, she began. I waited. I didn't think about what it meant to Jamie. I was so wrapped up in everything else. I forgot what mattered. You didn't forget, I said. You ignored it. She blinked, caught off guard by how calm I was. Yeah, she admitted. I guess I did. There was a pause. I lost everything, she said. Nate, my license is under review. Even Mom won't return my calls. I looked at her, not with anger, not with sympathy, just clarity. Maybe now you'll understand what it's like to be unheard. She nodded, eyes glassy. I miss him, she whispered. Jamie. I exhaled. He misses who he thought you were. Her face crumpled, but I didn't comfort her. Some lessons shouldn't be softened. The next morning I found something in Jamie's backpack. Folded paper. A school project. It was titled, What Makes a Good Man? His handwriting was a mix of jagged lines and growing confidence. It read, A good man tells the truth, even when it's hard. He protects people he loves. He doesn't lie to win or laugh when others get hurt. A good man is someone I want to be like. My dad is a good man. I read it twice. Then again, I didn't cry. I breathed. Deep, slow, like a tree finally free of a storm. 1 week later, I got a call I wasn't expecting. "Mr. Rivera?" the voice said. "This is Paula. I'm your aunt's neighbor. She asked me to reach out. She passed away last night." I stopped moving. Time hiccuped. "She left something for you. Said you'd understand." I drove to the small apartment where my Aunt May had lived. We hadn't been close in recent years, but she always treated me with more kindness than the rest. Quiet kindness. The kind that stays in the room, even after the person leaves. Her neighbor handed me a box. Inside, a sealed envelope, a small photo album, and a note. "Noah, I saw what they did. I always did. I just didn't know how to help. You broke the cycle. I'm proud of you. I kept a few things. I thought you should have them now. Love, May." The album had pictures from when I was a kid. Ones I didn't even remember being taken. Me holding a toy truck, Jamie's age. Smiling up at someone behind the camera. Then one of Ron, standing stiffly behind me. His hand on my shoulder, but his eyes on the camera like he wasn't really there. And one of Mom, smiling. But her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. The final photo was of Aunt May, arms around me, and Danielle, both of us young and messy and alive. There was warmth in her eyes. Real warmth. The kind I knew now I'd been chasing from the wrong people. That night, Jamie sat next to me on the couch, flipping through the album. "Who's that?" he asked, pointing at Aunt May. "That," I said, "was one of the few people in our family who didn't pretend love had conditions." He nodded. "I like her." "Me too," I whispered. Then he pointed at the photo of me holding the toy truck. "Why do you look sad?" I blinked. "Do I?" He studied it. "Kind of. Like you didn't trust the person taking the picture." Out of the mouths of children. I closed the album slowly. Maybe I didn't. I thought the worst had passed. But pain has a way of echoing when you least expect it. The next day, Mom called again. This time she left a voicemail. "I know I made mistakes, but you've punished all of us enough. Don't you think it's time to come home?" "Home?" I sat on the edge of the bed, listening to those words again. Home isn't a place. It's not the house I grew up in. Not the people who taught me shame before they ever taught me love. Home is where Jamie sleeps soundly, without wondering if he's good enough. Home is where I don't have to keep proving. I deserve peace. I deleted the voicemail. Later that week, Jamie and I went hiking. There's a trail nearby, short but full of trees that hold stories in their bark. At the top of the ridge, he picked up a smooth, flat rock and held it out to me. "Here," he said. "For you." I took it slowly. "What's this for?" He shrugged. "No reason. Just thought it looked cool." I smiled. "It does." I slipped it into my pocket, feeling its weight not like the one Ron gave him in that fake box. This one was real, simple, honest. "Thanks, buddy." He grinned. "You're welcome, Dad." And just like that, the world felt clean again. Spring came early that year. The air smelled green again. Not just warm, but alive. The trees near our porch shook off winter like they'd had enough of surviving. I understood the feeling. It had been 3 months since the trial. Ron hadn't spoken to me. Not directly. Not through Mom. Not even one of those cryptic guilt texts he used to send when he wanted something, but refused to say it out loud. Danielle was gone, moved out of state. Last I heard. Nate filed for full custody of their daughter, quietly, without drama. And Mom, well, she still tried calling once a week. Left long voicemails, all dressed in nostalgia. Remember when, and I just want my family back. But that family? It was never whole. It was glass trying to look like stone, and I was done bleeding from the edges. One night, Jamie and I were on the back porch, eating peanut butter sandwiches for dinner like royalty. "Do you think Grandpa misses us?" he asked. I didn't answer right away. I watched the sky instead, where the clouds were painted pink and slow. I think he misses the version of us that didn't speak up. Jamie nodded like he understood. "Do you miss them?" he asked next. "Sometimes," I said honestly. "But mostly I miss the idea of them, who I thought they were, who I hoped they'd become." He looked thoughtful. "I miss that too." Then he added, "But I don't miss the way they made you feel." That hit hard. Healing is strange. It doesn't always show up as joy. Sometimes it's just silence that doesn't feel like tension, or a Wednesday morning where your chest feels light for no reason. or your son sleeping through the night without calling out in a dream. Sometimes, healing is folding laundry and realizing you're not angry anymore. I started going to therapy, just me at first. Then, later, Jamie joined for a few sessions. The therapist told me something simple but sticky. You didn't break your family. You just stopped letting it break you. That line stayed in my chest like a lantern. Around late May, I got a letter. Handwritten. Careful script. It was from Ron. Noah, I've been thinking. A lot. Too late, maybe. I know I made mistakes. I see it now. I used to think love looked like structure and control. I thought keeping people in line meant keeping them safe. I see now that I was keeping them small. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to hear me say it plain. I was wrong. About you. About Jamie. About what family should be. I hurt you. I hurt him. And I'm sorry. For real. If I never see you again, I hope you build something better. Ron. I read it twice, then folded it, tucked it into a drawer, not because I wasn't ready to forgive, but because I wasn't ready to reopen a door I'd only just managed to close. Forgiveness isn't a performance. It's a process. And sometimes, the most honest thing you can do is let time carry the weight. Jamie had a school showcase in June. He stood on a small stage in a too big button-up shirt, reading a story he wrote for class. It was about a hero who didn't wear a cape or fly, just a dad who stood up when others stayed quiet. I didn't cry, but when he looked out over the crowd and smiled at me, I felt something shift. Not break, not burn, just change. Like something old had finally turned into something strong. After the event, we stopped for burgers. Sat in the booth by the window, our usual spot. Jamie unwrapped his burger slowly. So, you and Grandpa, will you ever talk again? Maybe, I said, one day, if I feel like there's something left to say. He thought about that, chewing. Would you let me talk to him, if I wanted to? I looked at him. Are you asking to? No, he said, just wondering. I nodded. If that day ever comes, we'll talk about it. Together. He smiled. That was enough for now. A few weeks later, I got a call from the bank. The woman on the other end was upbeat. Hi, Mr. Rivera. Just confirming your son's credit history has been successfully restored. Clean as a whistle. The report has been sealed, flagged, and protected. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for months. Thank you, I said. Thank you so much. Of course, she replied. It's rare we see a case like this resolved so thoroughly. You did good, Dad, I smiled. I'm trying. July rolled in with heat and quiet. Jamie and I spent more time outdoors, hiking, biking, tossing rocks into the lake, and pretending they were magic stones that granted wishes. One afternoon, we packed a picnic and hiked back to that ridge, the same one where he gave me the rock, the one that meant something real. He unpacked his sandwich, sat cross-legged in the grass. Can I tell you something? Always. I'm glad you said no to them, he said, even when they were your family. I looked at him. The wind pushed through his hair like it was blessing him. I didn't say no to family, I said. I said yes to us. He grinned. That's better. And it was. It's been a year now. We don't talk about the trial much, or the fallout, or the people who left. What we do talk about is what we're building. Jamie planted a tree in our yard last month. Just a sapling now, but he waters it every morning. I want it to grow tall, he says. Taller than anything else around. I know he means more than the tree. We still eat peanut butter sandwiches on the porch sometimes. Still take hikes. Still laugh at our own dumb jokes. That's the house we built. Not the one I grew up in. A better one. A real one. And maybe one day, when Jamie's older, he'll tell this story to someone. Not to relive the pain, but to remember the moment the story changed. The moment a rock wasn't just a joke in a box, but the beginning of something solid, something strong, something we could build on. Story 2. My sister took the stage to make an announcement at Thanksgiving dinner. We cast our votes. Additionally, you are no longer family. Everyone applauded. Well, I suppose you won't need this, I remarked, chuckling quietly. On the table, I put a folder. She began to scream as soon as she opened it, prior to the turkey being carved. With that self-satisfied, practiced smile, Natalie murmured as she got up from her chair. Something needs to be spoken. Everyone fell silent. Forks stopped in mid-stride. My stomach nodded. That tone seemed familiar to me. She used the same one to get me grounded for a party when I was 14. I didn't go there at all. We voted as a family. Looking around like a pageant queen about to be crowned, she went on. Additionally, we have determined that you are no longer family. Quiet. Then there was a lot of cheering. Laura, my cousin, clapped as if she were at a symphony. Uncle Mitch held out his glass of wine. My own mother even chuckled and remarked, "Well, it had to be spoken by someone." I sat still, gazing at my plate. My blood was boiling, but the stuffing had cooled. My father didn't even give me a glance, only murmured while taking a drink of his beer, "Most likely, it's for the best." I pushed my chair back gently and exclaimed, "Wow, do you people really practice this?" Natalie's smile widened. "For years, you have been poisonous." My mother reached for the cranberry sauce, as if we were talking about the weather, and said, "We're just finally done pretending you're not family." Everyone agrees. I had a look around. Nobody raised their voice, not one individual. "Excellent." Silently, I said. I then went into my bag. I expected this to occur. I added, removing a thick folder and carefully setting it in the middle of the table. The noise it produced. Give a thunk. Break through the giggling. Natalie's eyes blinked. "What is that?" I folded my arms, sat back in my chair, and grinned. "How about finding out?" She grabbed it and tore it up. When she believed she was winning, she always wore a snarky little grin, and her lips was already twisted. Then she stopped smiling and flipped the first page. Her face became white. She looked at the following page and the one after that. Then she let out a scream. Screamed like the type of scream you hear in a spine-tingling horror film. She sprang upright, slamming the folder close as if it had burnt her hands, and her chair smashed behind her. "You are a monster," she sobbed. "You made a mistake, a twisted oddball." Around the table, there were gasps. Her spouse, Joel, grabbed the folder and opened it. Then he became silent. He gave me a glance. "Is this?" "It's all genuine," I nodded once. I said, "Every word, every screenshot, and every receipt." The table became quiet. In the kitchen, you heard a fork clink, like a fish suffocating. My mother's jaw expanded and then closed again. "You were so certain that I wouldn't defend myself," I said, slowly getting to my feet, certain that I would continue to be the cash cow, the silent one, and the doormat. "But you know what?" I bent forward, looked directly into Natalie's eyes. "Your little performance. It's finished. Are you curious in the contents of the folder? I'll make it. Let me tell you how we got here first, though. Since Natalie didn't wake up one day and declare me to be unrelated, years went into making that decision. One brick at a time. Comment by comment. Betrayal by treachery. They never liked me. Not even close. The star was Natalie, the girl in gold. Excellent marks. A broad smile. Understood how to operate a room. She could make someone appreciate her for lying in front of them. In contrast, I kept quiet. They detested the fact that private eyes didn't require care. My quiet was seen by them as weakness. At 19, I moved out. I paid for my own college education, held 2 jobs, never sought assistance. Natalie, meanwhile, dropped out of 2 majors, traveled to Europe in search of herself, then returned home and wed Joel, the blazer-wearing human counterpart of a LinkedIn profile. My parents couldn't afford the wedding I paid for, but they managed to get a 2-week trip immediately after. I didn't voice any complaints. I didn't. I continued to assist in covering Dad's dental surgery even after they made fun of me for being the family accountant, sending funds. Mom mentioned that the heat bill was past due, even paying for a portion of my cousin Laura's tuition when she was placed on a scholarship wait list. They were always grateful, yes, but in the tone that indicated, well, you'd help, of course. You're not a parent yourself. Perhaps that's what caused it. You see, I don't have a partner. No spouse, no children, and no drama. Me, my job, and my dog alone. That implied to them that I had nothing better to do than pay for their trash. In particular, Natalie made me feel like her own safety net. She phoned me first after Joel lost his job. Only a little loan when her vehicle malfunctioned. You earn 6 figures. What is $2,000? When her insurance refused to pay for the therapy her child needed. Yes, you know who she called? I was always helpful. Always. Because it was family, I told myself. But assisting, become a duty. Then into anticipation. Then demand. At dinner, it sparked a few backhanded jokes. You brought wine, I see. Good wine must be lovely to afford. You are obviously early. There are no children for you to worry about. I wish I could stay away from my hubby and work late every night. Then it became more unsightly. You're really chilly. Perhaps that's the reason you're still by yourself. You have no idea what true stress is. There is no genuine life for you. Simply put, you're upset that nobody needs you. However, they did require my assistance. Always. In terms of money. Behind closed doors. Quietly. Then the text arrived. Natalie, would you be able to co-sign a small company loan? Joel and I intend to open a cafe focused on well-being. Me? No. Natalie? Really though? Then there was stillness. 3 months have passed since then. I've been ignored ever since. Mom didn't call anymore. 1 word was sent. Answers. I was not invited to the most recent family meal. After sharing a tale about removing harmful people from her social media accounts, Natalie banned me. I didn't sit and pout though. I began grabbing receipts instead. Actual receipts. You see, I maintain documents, emails, screenshots, money transactions, and dates. I'm not a moron. And I would send more than $78,000 to different family members only in the last 5 years. $78,000. $8,000 to pay for Joel's treatment. $2,300 for Natalie's urgent dental care, which was ultimately approved. For my dad's back surgery, veneers cost $1,500. My mom owes $12,000 in her credit card, $4,500 for a family emergency that ended up becoming a trip to Cabo, and $6,000 for Loris College move-in. And not one of them ever offered to reimburse me. They simply took. They concluded that I was the issue when I ceased contributing. I thus created the folder within each email and text message, requesting money as well as each transfer confirmation. Images of Natalie accusing me of being manipulative to her buddy after I refused the loan. A list of all the significant payments I've made during the previous 5 years. I also have screenshots of Natalie calling me a cash cow with no spine in a private comment thread, which is the icing on the cake, along with copies of Facebook and Instagram postings where they made fun of me. She was unaware of my access. So, when she opened the folder, that's what she saw. The fact that Natalie wasn't simply exposed was what caused her to scream. They disassembled her, fact by fact, page by page, line by line, as the rest of the family became aware of their actions. Mom looked like she was about to pass out. Joel, he merely muttered, "What is this?" as he gazed at the line that said, $1 for $200 to cover Natalie's credit card used at a hotel in Santa Monica with someone named Alyssa. I didn't respond. For the first time in my life, I wasn't defending myself, so I didn't have to. All I was doing was telling them the truth. "You maintained records?" At last, my mother remarked, her voice trembling. Of all things, calm as ever, I turned to face her. "You didn't recall. Therefore, someone had to." Natalie was still standing, her fists clutched at her sides, and she was still pale. She glanced at Joel. "To the folder, to me." She spat. "This is a violation. I thought you had no right to know," I said, slowly getting to my feet. "You simply declared me to be not family in front of the entire family." Everyone clapped. "And you're angry now that I was ready?" Joel turned the folder over one more page. "How does this relate to Santa Monica?" His voice was tight as he asked. Natalie's head jerked in his direction. "Don't begin." "Who is Alyssa?" he went on. "Why did you spend 3 nights at a hotel using my credit card?" No response could overpower her silence. "Hold on," my mother interrupted, raising her hands. "Can't we all just be reasonable and relax?" "Yes," I replied. "Let's be sensible. Let's talk about the time you cashed the check I sent you and called me a parasite." She blinked. "It's unfair. We were under pressure." "No, I lost my temper. I always came through for you when you were in trouble. And the one occasion when I refuse." My dad, who had been completely silent up until this point, suddenly spoke out against the enemy. "This is becoming more significant than it actually is because of you." I turned to him and my voice dropped. "You let them do this to me for years. You knew. You saw it. You heard it. And you let it happen. Because it was easier than standing up to them." He didn't deny it. Natalie slammed her hand on the table. "You're just bitter because no one needs you anymore." "Wrong," I said coldly. "I'm not resentful. I'm done." She let out a bitter laugh. "You're pathetic." Do you know how dramatic this all looks? Bringing a folder, printing screenshots. You think this makes you the victim? You're just proving you're a control freak, and you're just proving. I said that you only cared about me when I was paying your bills. You don't get to play the martyr, she shouted. You chose to help. You didn't have to. And yet somehow, I said taking a step forward. You expected it every single time, until it wasn't help anymore. It was duty. And when I stopped, you voted me out. My voice broke, not from sadness, from rage. You didn't want a brother. You wanted a wallet with legs. Joel stood up, now holding the folder. Is this true? He asked, looking at Natalie. All of this? Natalie looked at him, and for the first time, she didn't have a comeback. No fake tears, no deflection, just silence. You lied to me, he said, about the hotel, about the money, about him. You made it sound like he was crazy. I had to. She exploded. He was turning everyone against me. I wasn't. I said you did that all by yourself. The room went quiet again. Then my mom leaned forward and tried one more time. Her voice softened. Listen, honey, we may have overreacted, but this is still family and families fight. Let's just put this behind us. I cut her off. You're not hearing me. She blinked. What? I'm not asking for peace. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm telling you, I'm done. Natalie sneered. Oh, stop pretending like this is some big moment. You've said that before. I looked her dead in the eyes. Not like this. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out another envelope. What now? My dad asked, plainly fatigued. I tossed it onto the table. Joel caught it before it slid off. He opened it. Read the first line. His eyes expanded. What is this? He whispered. I answered for him. Power of attorney. Forms for mom. Revoked. Medical proxy. Revoked. Emergency contact. Removed. I've already signed the documents. I am legally and emotionally no longer accountable for any of you. My mother gasped. You're cutting ties altogether. Completely? Start now, I replied. She started to cry as she continued. You're being selfish. Despite our shortcomings, we remain your family. My words trailed off once again as I turned to face her. Be calm. Final. No, you're not. They were in the middle of Thanksgiving dinner when I picked up my coat, gave them one final glance, and left. Surrounded by chilly food and unpleasant realities, stunned and unable to speak, I left without turning around. Not because it was painless. Yes, it did. However, I walked off their porch and into the chilly night air as I shut the door behind me. Something changed inside of me. In years, for the first time, I was able to breathe. I didn't go home by car. Near the lake I used to go to as a child, I stopped off the road. Dad used to take me fishing there. I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time as I sat quietly and gazed out at the still ocean. I'm not being pulled by anything. No pressure, no guilt. No one is waiting for a favor, a ride, or a check. Nothing except silence. The following morning, quiet. The following day, nothing has changed. However, the communications began on the third day. First, a missed call from my mom. Then, another. A voicemail followed. Do you mean it? We were upset. We are still your family, though. I didn't answer. Then Natalie started texting. You're not even aware of your actions. Joel is going to file for divorce. Are you content? There is a serious problem with you. Next, my father. You overreached yourselves. We all regret the things we spoke. However, your actions were nuclear. Your mom is a complete mess. Come, take care of this. None of them received a response from me. And to be honest, I was afraid I would feel bad. I slept better than I have in years, despite my thoughts that I toss and turn at night, wondering whether I'd gone too far, second-guessing every SMS message was over. Don't wait for the other shoe to drop any longer. No more guilt trips masquerading as crises and late-night Venmo pleas. My thoughts were audible for the first time in 10 years. I began getting up early, making coffee, and going on runs. Slowly, I scheduled appointments that I neglected for years. Dentist, physician, a therapist even. I was finally able to take care of myself, not because I was broken. I changed my passwords, deleted my parents, rebuilt my emergency contacts, and froze all of the joint accounts they had access to. Blocked Natalie on all social media sites. Retaliation was no longer the focus. It has to do with closure. Laura texted me 1 week after Thanksgiving. When I was voted out, my cousin applauded. I had no idea that you covered my tuition. I apologize. I went with the flow. The one who truly helped was always you. I read it twice, but I didn't respond. Then there was another surprise. Joel's message. The documents were filed by me. Everything was in order in that folder. She cheated, lied, manipulated. Not only you. Me too, he said. You made the correct decision. I ought to have departed earlier. I didn't anticipate that. However, a few days later, it touched down. For the first time in years, I did something. In another city, I applied for a job. It was because I was at last free, not because I was running. Not anymore. You ought to remain nearby. Not anymore. If you leave them, who will look after them? I began getting back in touch with friends I hadn't seen in a long time. I had distanced myself from them because I was constantly preoccupied with family matters. And the most outrageous aspect? A few of them had seen my Reddit post. All they wanted to say was, "We're proud of you." It was courageous. Nobody requested money. I am not guilty. Nobody made an attempt to spin it. Simply provide assistance. Easy, sincere, tidy. I was asked, "You regret it, don't you?" After giving it some thought, I said, "I only regret not doing it sooner." That seemed like the end to me. It was, in a sense, but there's never a clean ending with people like them, particularly when they begin to suffer as a result of your absence. After Thanksgiving, the first few weeks were eerily, beautifully quiet. No guilt, no calls, just tranquility. Right up until Christmas. My mother texted me on December 2020. Just a photo. It was their living room decked out with stockings, a half-decorated tree in front and center, a massive empty space where they usually stacked the presents. "It doesn't feel the same without you," the caption said. "Ellie keeps asking why Uncle isn't coming this year." I stared at it for a long time. No apology, no ownership, just the same manipulative undertone. "Look what you've done. Look who you're hurting." I didn't reply. December 23rd. Natalie tried phoning. I let it ring out. Then she sent a message. "I realize I messed up, but you don't have to punish everyone. Just come by for Ellie. She misses you." 2 minutes later. "Also, Mom and Dad are overdue on their mortgage. I know you don't care anymore, but the bank phoned today. I thought you'd want to know." There it was. The ask. Always veiled under a cloak of shame. Always wrapped in artificial softness. But there was usually a plea at the end. The number was blocked by me. December 24. This time, it was from Dad. Another SMS. "You got your message across. We understand. However, enough is enough. We require assistance. You still have us in your blood." I had a glass of wine and sat by the fireplace by myself that evening. I surveyed my little flat. Not a tree. Not a sound. They constantly told that I would be destroyed if I was left alone. And I was grateful for the stillness for the first time in my life. However, it didn't stop there. January. I didn't recognize the number that called me because I was accustomed to it. "Is Daniel here?" The voice of a guy inquired. "Indeed. Who's phoning?" He said, "My name is Mark. On your father's behalf, I'm phoning." "You are the principal executor of the family trust," he said. I went cold. I answered, "I revoked that role 2 months ago. The family lawyer made the ultimate decision. Everything has my name on it." The man hesitated. "I understand. Your father requested me to look into my possibilities because he was unable to get in touch with you directly. They're in a difficult situation. They were, of course. There was nothing left for Natalie and my parents to do. There was no ATM. The safety net has vanished. They were now attempting to use their imagination. Without saying anything else, I hung up. But February was the last straw. An envelope arrived in the mail, written by hand. I immediately recognized my mother's handwriting, even though there was no return address. There was a letter inside. 3 pages. Remorse filled the first page. We spoke out of rage. "You have always been the one with strength. We were so dependent on you that we were unaware of it." Guilt took up the second page. "Your father is not doing well. Now, Natalie is all by herself. Ellie is causing us concern. She's having trouble." The third page too. The hook was that. "Although we are underwater on the mortgage, we are selling the house. All we need is a little assistance to get through this. We won't ask again after that. Daniel, please, for your father's sake, do it. Take care of the family." I took some time to sit with the letter. I allowed myself to experience all of their desired emotions. The burden of accountability, the pain of responsibility, the agonizing want to repair what was damaged. I folded the letter after that, arose, tossed it in the garbage after walking to the kitchen. In actuality, they weren't requesting assistance. Once more, they were requesting admission. I was not welcomed back into the family. They preferred the me who didn't refuse. The quiet pair made a silent sacrifice, suffered in silence. But that me, he is no longer there. They no longer use me as a scapegoat. Their golden goose isn't me. The duct tape that keeps a damaged house together is not me. I'm finished. And for them, the scariest part. Without them, I'm doing just great. I obtained a new job, moved to a larger, new city. A fresh start. I began doing weekend volunteer work. One did it because I wanted to, not because anyone needed me. I created a life in which I am not contacted at 11 p.m. to hide an error they refuse to own, where compassion isn't exploited as leverage, and where I'm not penalized for being self-sufficient. I regret how long it took me to quit, but I don't regret assisting them. Do you want to experience true peace? It's not having family around. It's letting go of those who only refer to you as family when they are in need. Update after several months. I had no idea this post would be seen. To be honest, I only had to say it to get it out there. However, I read all of the comments. Those who praised your bravery. They're not worthy of you. Thank you. Before I heard it, I had no idea how much I needed to hear it. And to those who inquired, what if they do, however? Yes, I have also asked myself that question. Now, several months have passed. I interrupted them, but they remained the same. After the letters, after the stillness, after the yelling, after the folder, I had the hope that someone would understand, think about it, and say, "We're sorry they didn't." They fell silent for a time. They then adopted a strategic approach. Then they were desperate. Then they became hideous once more. However, I was set free. Since then, I have relocated. I have a job that doesn't need me to stay up late. Began treatment, actual treatment. The sort when you give up trying to make other people better. Lastly, master the art of sitting by oneself. I now prepare meals for myself. My sleep is improved. I spend more time outside. When the telephone buzzes, I don't flinch. Indeed, there are moments when I consider Ellie, what she is being taught, and what she will come to believe is typical. However, I am also aware of this. I was the one who finally had enough to say. My mother wrote me another letter a few days ago. 3 words were used. We remain family. No apology, no context, no change. The same old hook. And I felt nothing for the first time. No sadness, no rage, nothing at all. After throwing it away, I prepared dinner. I returned because this location provided me with a level of clarity that I had not anticipated. I was more visible to strangers than to my own kin. I would want to ask you this. Did I make the correct decision, severing them, lowering the weight? Was I being too chilly by saying no? Or had I simply had enough of being the only one keeping everything together? I'm not sure. However, I am aware of this. In my life, for the first time, I'm not making it through. I'm still alive. I appreciate you reading. I'm still listening. Story 3, I don't even know where to begin. However, given that this is Reddit, I'll make it easy. I discovered a sold sign on my front yard today after returning from a business trip. I don't require a fancy house, my stepfather said with a sly smile. He was packing for his VIP tour of Europe. However, when he returned, he had nowhere to go because I had allowed him to board his flight. Allow me to introduce myself before I get into how it occurred. Ethan is my name. I am a structural engineer, and I am 28 years old. Although it pays well, my job is quite demanding. I travel between tasks more often than I spend time at home. My home was the only thing that kept me sane. My own space. I reasoned that my house was no longer mine as of that day. Like this youngster, you don't need a house. As soon as I got onto my street, I sensed something was wrong. I had recently returned from a 3-week out-of-state work trip. I simply wanted to take a shower and collapse on my couch, since I was so tired from only 3 hours of airplane sleep. However, I was horrified by what I saw as I pulled up to my house. A sign with white soles and a bright red color was affixed to my front yard. I applied the brakes so forcefully that my tires screamed. What I was witnessing was too much for my brain to grasp. No, that must have been an error. I virtually sprinted to the front door as soon as I parked into the driveway. I still had my work bag hanging over my shoulder. However, I heard his voice before I could enter. Richard? My stepfather. He was putting my belongings into my residence. Through the entrance door, I rushed, hammering of the heart. What's happening? Richard hardly raised his head from using packing tape to seal a box. Oh, you're returning sooner than I expected, child. Youngster. That's what he always called me. As if I were still a naive adolescent rather than a mature adult who had earned all he owned. My purse fell to the ground. Why does my yard have a sold sign on it? Richard sighed dramatically as if I were the one bothering him. We made a sale. My stomach turned over. We? I moved in closer. Are you saying that we? Richard put down the tape and gave me a slowed down look. Ethan, it's clear to both your mother and myself that you don't require such a large home for someone your age. It's absurd. You ought to rent a modest flat, preserving funds. He gestured with his hand. Later, you'll thank me. My fingers clenched into fists. This is my home, Richard. The first spent my money on that. You were not entitled. He chuckled. I laughed. You think you accomplished this by yourself, kid? Do you believe you're a self-made celebrity? Like I was a kid? He gave me a shoulder clap. All assets are pooled, and the money is family. In reality, you own nothing. I flinched as if he had smacked me. Shared assets and family funds. No, that was untrue. How? My home was stolen. Things become technical at this point. Indeed, the home was paid for by me. Yes, I paid my mortgage on time each time. However, the house was first purchased when I was 23. I'm too young to obtain a decent loan by myself. Even though I had excellent credit, the bank still needed a co-signer. What about my mom? She offered to help. My stepfather. It's only paperwork. Ethan, she'd replied at the time, dismissing my worries. It will remain your home. I assumed my name was on the deed, so I signed the paperwork. And first, it was. I was unaware that Richard had secretly refinanced the mortgage during my absence. Months ago, my name was subtly taken off the deed. Now that the house was entirely in his name, he was legally free to sell it. I was ill. You? How? My throat choked on my voice. Richard grinned. Oh, don't appear so shocked. Years have passed since you signed the documents. Kiddo, you really ought to read the tiny print. I had trembling hands. Mom is where? Richard gave a shrug. Italy is already here, required a brief respite. I tightened my jaw. What precisely did you leave me when you sold my property and pocketed the proceeds? Don't be too theatrical, please. He gave me a toddler-like pat on the face while grinning. You're still young. It will come to you. However, I had a strategy. Richard swung a sleek leather luggage over his shoulder after zipping it up. Listen, I wish I could stay and talk, but I have to leave for a flight. Hotels with 5 stars, private excursions. The work is first-rate throughout. I simply gazed at him. He passed me on his way to the front door. I'll bring you a lovely memento. Yes. Then he disappeared. As I stood there, I gazed at the vacant area where my furniture had been. My house. I had just had my entire life taken from me, and there was nothing I could do about it. That's what Richard believed anyway. I allowed him to get on his flight. At 30,000 feet, I gave him a glass of champagne, believing he had won. 2 weeks later, however, he returned home and came to a realization. He had nowhere to go. Where had I been? Yes, exactly. I had lost my home. I stood in the wreckage of my former life, trying not to punch a hole in the wall while my stepfather sipped champagne in first class. I wasn't going to go crazy, though. I would exact revenge. Ethan, you must look at the wider picture. I called my mother first thing in the morning. No response. I gave another call, directly to voicemail. On the third call, I was furious and trembling, not just because she wasn't picking up, but because she already knew. Weeks, perhaps months, had passed since she found out, nor had she forewarned me. I texted her mom, "Call me now." 3 dots appeared. She was typing. Then the message popped up. "Mom, I don't want to do this over the phone. We'll talk when I'm back." I stared at the screen. My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. She wanted to wait. After they had sold my house out from under me, I called again. This time she picked up Ethan. "I really don't appreciate the tone of your messages." Her voice was calm, detached, like I was the one overreacting. I gripped my phone so tightly my fingers ached. "You don't appreciate my tone," I repeated, laughing bitterly. "Mom, are you out of your mind? You sold my house. She let out a sigh, like I was being difficult. Ethan, sweetheart, Richard and I talked about this, and we really think this is for the best. I nearly dropped the phone. For the best. For whom? For you, she insisted. Honey, you have to admit, a house like that was just too much for you. It's expensive, big, a lot of responsibility. You work so much. You barely have time to enjoy it. What's the point of throwing money into a place you don't even use? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Mom, I bought that house. I wanted that responsibility. She'd said, Ethan, you're still young. You don't need a massive house at this stage of your life. Richard and I found a much better option for you. A modern little condo right in the city. It's low maintenance, affordable, much more suitable. I was speechless. A condo. You stole my house, and now you're trying to convince me to settle for a condo? She sighed like I was being a child. Sweetheart, you have to see the bigger picture. Richard really helped you here. He freed you from all that stress. And listen, we didn't just take everything. A portion of the money will go toward helping you get that condo. Richard will handle the details once we're back. My stomach turned, and the rest. A pause occurred. Then she said, well, a little went toward our trip, but Ethan, come on. It's all family money. We all deserve a little happiness, don't we? I felt like I was going to be sick. She actually believed this. She actually thought they had done me a favor. Legally, he had every right. I spent the next 2 hours going through my paperwork, desperate to find some way to fight this. There had to be something, some legal loophole, some document that would prove that the house was still mine. But when I got to the refinancing papers, my stomach turned to stone because there it was in black and white, months ago, while I had been working out of state. Richard had refinanced the mortgage in his name. Only my name had been removed from the deed, making him the sole owner. He had done it so quietly, so strategically, that by the time I even realized what had happened, it was already too late. I read the fine print 3 times, hoping I had missed something, but I hadn't. Legally, he had every right to sell my home. The money was already gone. My next action was to examine my financial accounts. I knew I hadn't seen any money from the transaction, but I needed to be sure. When I launched the banking app, my hands started to shake because I saw precisely what I feared. A $490,000 deposit from the home sale, followed by repeated withdrawals, hotel reservations, luxury brands, a wire transfer to a foreign account. I felt like I was going to get ill. The money wasn't merely gone. It had already been spent, but I wasn't done yet. I sat in my empty house, gazing at my phone, feeling wrath grow in my chest. Richard believed he'd won, but I wasn't going to let him get away with this. I inhaled deeply, steadied my hands, and placed 2 calls. The first was my attorney. One element was missing from my uncle David C. Richards II. My mother was the sole reason he got the credit to refinance the house. She didn't want him to know something that I knew. Richard was on the verge of ruin. Give him time to enjoy his visit of Europe. Allow him to have a glass of champagne and believe he got away with it, because there wouldn't be a single dime left in his name when he returned home. And he was going to experience firsthand what it was like to lose everything. Okay, rate it. The exciting part is about to begin. Richard believed that he had pulled off the ideal con. He congratulated himself for assisting me, stole my house, wasted the money, and flew to Europe. He was unaware, however, that I could untangle his whole existence, since he had left just enough loose threads. Therefore, I was laying the groundwork for his demise while he was in Paris, drinking expensive wine. First, freeze everything. My first call was to Sam, my lawyer. Sam was someone I'd known in college. He was really smart, but he wasn't some big-shot lawyer. More significantly, he detested men like Richard. When he had finished describing everything, Sam whistled softly. Ethan, Jesus, he truly let you down. I'm not joking. I paced my empty living room while muttering, let me know if there is anything I can do. Yes, legally. He was entitled to the house's sale. I felt sick to my stomach. However, Sam went on, his tone growing gloomy. I may have noticed anything if he had refinanced the mortgage without telling you. How? As the deed's original name was yours. Sam clarified. We can file a case against Richard if he used deception to get you out, forged signatures, or withheld papers. My fist tightened. Can we demonstrate that? That's what I will discover. Sam promised to look over all the documents to see whether Richard had breached any laws throughout the refinance procedure. I could have frozen his money, taken him to court, and made his life a living hell if he had. But I didn't stop there. Step 2. Burn his bridges. I then gave Uncle David a ring. My mom's oldest brother is Uncle David. He despises Richard. Years ago, he realized his phony charm was a lie. Nevertheless, my mother married the man despite his cautions. David lost it when I told him what had occurred. That manipulator. Do you mean me? Your house was stolen by him. Oh, I continued. It gets better. He refinanced using his mother's credit. She probably has no idea how deeply involved she is in this. David muttered an expletive. What can I do for you? David is the owner of a small accounting company. Richard has been utilizing his services for years, which is fortunate for me. He trusted my uncle to take care of everything, even his company papers and taxes. David was now more than eager to see Richard's financial records. I'll look for any suspicious material in his works. David said he would. Additionally, he will face more issues than you if he is avoiding taxes. I smiled. I hoped you would say precisely that. The last blow is step 3. For the following 2 weeks, I waited with my head down. I said nothing at all. Didn't give my mom a call. Richard didn't get any messages. Give him the impression that everything was okay. David went over Richard's accounts as Sam combed through the mortgage documents. Richard was scheduled to return home via plane just 3 days prior. I received 2 calls. Sam gave the first one. Bingo. Richard committed mortgage fraud, he said. In order to proceed with the refinance without my permission, Richard apparently falsified my signature on a few documents. That meant I could sue him since his entire sale of the house was unlawful. Send me everything. We're bringing him down, I informed Sam. Next. David called an hour later. This is going to be fantastic. I nearly laughed, he said. In Richard's tax returns, I discovered unreported income. I became alert. What sort of income? To put it mildly, he has been evading the IRS for years. Thousands upon thousands, beneath the table as well. All cash was not reported. He's going to be dealing with a serious audit if I make the right phone calls. A slow, icy smile appeared on my face. Make the phone calls. Thank you. I had lost everything to Richard. I was robbing him of everything now. When Richard returns home, he discovers that he made a mistake. At 4:15 p.m., Richard's plane touched down. Sunday, 4:37 p.m., across the street from his house. I was waiting in my car. There wasn't much waiting for me. When a black Uber SUV arrived, Richard, wearing a high-end coat and appearing as arrogant as ever, got out. He hummed to himself as he rolled his luggage up the driveway, and when he got to the front door, he entered the key code and nothing occurred. Richard scowled and made another attempt. Nothing has changed. Then the door opened and my mother appeared, and even from the other side of the street, she did not appear to be happy. Their voices were audible. What? Linda, what is causing the code to malfunction? My mom crossed her arms. We must speak. She blocked the doorway as Richard attempted to enter. Not here. Let me in, please. Richard, she said, her voice trembling abruptly. The bank stopped our accounts. His expression shifted instantaneously. What? I don't know what occurred, she sobbed. Everything was fine. And then this morning I wanted to withdraw money, and they told the account was closed. Richard's cheeks grew pale. Very, very pale. Then his phone rang. He responded, walking away from my mom. And that's when I spotted it. His entire body tensed. He started ranting into the phone. I knew precisely who he was talking to since the IRS audit notification had just come in his mailbox. His tax scam had just been discovered. They had just identified his unlawful mortgage. He had no notion who was responsible for the sudden collapse of his entire financial existence. Grinning, I drove off. I had the option of staying and observing. I had the option to approach Richard, look him in the eyes, and explain what I had done. However, I didn't. Because letting him discover that he lost on his own is the finest kind of retaliation. My house was lost, but you just lost everything, Richard. Okay, go through it. Hold on tight. Because this is where the wonderful stuff happens. The last time Richard returned home, my mother barred him from accessing their home. His bank accounts were stopped, and his tax fraud was made public. His entire financial life was falling apart around him, but he had no idea what was going on. However, that was only the start. It was time to see him drown now. This was done by whom? I didn't stay to see Richard go completely crazy in real time. Rather, the first made myself a drink, drove home, and waited for my mother to call, which was inevitable. It took very little time. Her name appeared on my phone at precisely 6:42 p.m. I let it to ring, then ring once more, and once more. I finally went to pick up Mom. She sounded tremulous. "Do you know what's going on, Ethan?" I sipped my whiskey while leaning back in my chair. "It depends. What's the matter?" She exhaled frantically. "The accounts of Richard have been frozen. The mortgage company claims there is a legal disagreement about the sale of your home, and the IRS is looking into him for tax fraud." I acted as though I was surprised. "Whoa. He seems to be having a terrible day, Ethan." She lost her temper. "This isn't amusing. Do you? Have you taken any action?" I let the stillness to linger. Then, quite quietly, I said, "My house was stolen by you and Richard." She winced. She let out a quick breath, and I could hear it. "My dear," her voice grew softer as she began, "you must comprehend. Your future was on our minds. You simply couldn't handle the responsibilities of the house." I chuckled. "Dark and low responsibility. That's your justification. I lost everything because of you. And now you're angry because Richard has to deal with the fallout. Ethan," she muttered. "Everything will be lost for him." I grinned. "Excellent." A sudden intake of breath was heard. "That's not what you mean." "Oh," I said, "I do. Because, Mama, guess what? Not just him is losing everything. Richard had nowhere to go." After hanging up on my mother, Uncle David, who had front row tickets to the collapse of the century, told me what occurred next. I sent David a text. "Me? David, how awful is it? Not good. David. Richard attempted to withdraw funds from a company account. Frozen. David attempted to contact his tax preparer. Learned that he is being audited by the IRS. David was in a panic. He then attempted to enter the residence. And, Mom, me, what? David, his mother ejected him." I straightened my posture. "His mother ejected him. Me? You're joking, David." "Not at all. She's going crazy. She's not interested in becoming entangled in his mess. She told him to solve his own problems and locked him out." "Me? Now, where is he, David?" "I have no idea. But he's sleeping in his car, if I had to guess." My smile wouldn't go away. Over the past 10 years, Richard had dominated me and treated me like a helpless child in need of his direction. He was now homeless. "Please, Ethan, we need your assistance." One day, then another. My phone rang once again on the third day. "Mom." I let it to ring, then ring once more. Finally, I responded. "Mom." She spoke in a strained tone. "We have to talk, Ethan." I put down my drink. "What is it about?" She paused. "Then Richard is. He's having problems. There is nowhere for him to go. He's in a hotel, napping." "But he did." I chuckled. "Not a hotel, I'm afraid. What a tragedy." "Ethan," she begged, "please. We need your assistance." I bent over. "Do you need my assistance? Do you mean the same kid you took from your sweetie who wasn't prepared for the responsibilities of home ownership?" "Hold on. Mom, where's the money?" I interrupted her. "Where's the money?" "From the residence." "Keep quiet." Then silently, "It's gone." With a deep, contented fire in my chest, I closed my eyes. It was, of course. They had used it all out. First-class travel, opulent lodgings, and shopping excursions in Rome and Paris. In just a few weeks, they had spent about $500,000. They had nothing now. I inhaled deeply. "Let me clarify. You took my house, sold it, and then squandered the proceeds. And you want me to fix it now that Richard is homeless?" Her voice broke. "We were wrong." I grinned. "Indeed, you did." I hung up after that. At last, Richard snaps. It ought to have ended there. But he wasn't finished yet, Richard. At precisely 11:47 p.m. that evening, I heard someone knock on my door. He was there when I looked at the folks. Richard. His hair, which he typically slicked back, was a mess. His eyes were bloodshot, and his clothing was crumpled. He appeared to have gone days without sleep. I leaned on the doorframe after opening it just enough. "Richard." His breath came out shakily. "Listen, Ethan." "I am aware," I interrupted him. "What are you going to ask?" "No." He clenched his jaw. "All I need is a little time, a location for me to remain." I chuckled directly at him. He winced. Then slowly, I muttered as I drew closer, "You no longer call this place home." I saw his face contort, simultaneously displaying despair guilt, and wrath. You are a self-centered child. After taking a step back, I slammed the door in his face. He beat on it. You're a self-centered person, Ethan. After locking the deadbolt, I turned to go. As I switched on the TV, got a beer, and sat on my sofa, the yelling subsided. I had won, and Richard was finished. Okay, read it. It's this, the last section. Everything was gone for Richard. His financial accounts were blocked. His tax scam was discovered. He was locked out by his wife. His reputation was ruined. And now, like a self-destructive idiot, he stood outside my door pleading for assistance. How did it all end in the end? Well, it exceeded my expectations by far. The final, desperate action. I slammed the door shut in Richard's face after that. I thought he would go. He didn't. Rather, his voice trembling with anger, he began banging on the door. You haughty fellow, Ethan. Do you find this amusing? Come on in. I sipped my drink once more. Be calm. Not bothered. Richard, you're wasting your energy. I yelled. You ought to put it away for when the IRS comes calling. Quiet. Then, hey. The door was pounded by him. Come on in. You never show gratitude, do you? I let out a sigh. Then, without saying anything else, after taking out my phone, I dialed 911. Yes, hello. A dude is attempting to break into my house, I added nonchalantly. He is yelling threats. He doesn't reside here, sorry. Indeed. Someone should come fetch him, please. Richard was staggering back from the entrance, gazing around furiously when I caught a glimpse of him through the glass. He was most likely aware that he was only 5 minutes away from being taken into custody. After whispering something to himself, he walked down the street like a man in a suit, and it was the last time I ever saw him. The last strike. Richard's life fell apart in the weeks that followed. The IRS audit was completed. They discovered concealed foreign accounts in addition to years of tax evasion, which led to a full-scale federal inquiry. The fraud case proceeded. Richard's lawyer, Sam, participates in court documents. It turns out that a mortgage document was forged with someone's name on it. That is absolutely unlawful. My mom filed for divorce. Yes, she jumped ship, locked their shared funds, got her own lawyer, and permanently tossed Richard out the minute she saw he was pulling her down with him. I wish I could claim that she did it because she at last had a conscience. But no, she was afraid, so she did it. It didn't make me angry. Richard had nowhere to go anymore, so it was actually ideal. Richard, where are you now? The finest part comes next. It had been months since I had heard from Richard. However, I saw Uncle David at a coffee shop a few weeks ago. We took a seat and caught up. Then I asked at last, "What happened to Richard?" David smiled. "This is going to be fantastic." It turns out that Richard attempted to leave the country after losing everything. Yes, he did make a flight reservation and attempt to vanish. However, there was a minor issue. He was stopped at the airport as he attempted to board the aircraft because the IRS had previously flagged his passport. My coffee almost suffocated me. "Are you serious?" David chuckled. "Extremely serious. He is attempting to contest the accusations, as far as I know. However, he fouled up the indebtedness, tax evasion, and fraud case." I took a deep breath and leaned back in my chair. It was done. Richard finished. In my case, I received my money back. Naturally, not all of it. Even though the house was gone, I still had a good amount of cash from the lawsuit settlement and damages, as well as my mom. She made an effort to apologize, sent lengthy, remorseful texts, left voicemails expressing her desire to make up for her error. But I came to a realization, so I never answered. She never truly supported me. She had supported Richard until I no longer found it convenient. All I was collateral damage. For the first time in my life, I interrupted her. I didn't have any family responsibilities, guilt, or anything holding me back. Only freedom. And, well, was it pleasant? Last words. I was deceived and destitute a few months ago. I now have a new home and a new beginning. And whole bank account containing Richard's funds. The nicest part is that every night I slept like a baby, because I am aware that Richard is laying awake in a jail cell someplace, wondering what went wrong. And that's the most delicious form of retaliation.